Marcelo. Thank you, Jan. I have a question as well for you, but maybe I ask it a little later. So hello, my name is Vaitea, and I'm one of the co-founders of Enapter. Enapter is a young company. We started in November 2017, and our vision is a world where fossil fuels are no longer burned. And the way we achieve this is by replacing fossil fuels with hydrogen. So hydrogen is a clean energy source. Sorry, it's not a source, it's an energy vector actually, but that can be created from our renewable energies. So I'll get into the technical bits a little bit later, but I do wanted to keep this a little bit more story-based to move into why hydrogen and what is it actually. So as I said, well, as Marcelo introduced, I'm now living in Berlin. I moved here 2 years ago, and before I moved to Germany, I studied in Montreal. So I did my university studies in Montreal, and after 4 years, I realized I love the snow. I'm a skier, but I'm a little cold. Maybe I travel and explore the world, see what else there is. I knew Europe, I knew the United States, but I had never been to Southeast Asia. So packed my bags and I decided to go to Thailand. It was my first time there, and I landed in Chiang Mai. Essentially, what drew me there was the love of nature, the culture. I was extremely curious to see what was going to be there, what adventure would await. And one day on one of my explorations, I ended at the footsteps of the world's first solar hydrogen home. It's called the Vaitea House. Maybe someone has heard about it, maybe not, but if you haven't, then we will come back to it a little later. But this is a bit of my journey. Didn't know about hydrogen, and then ended at the doorsteps of the hydrogen technology. Hello. So before I moved to Thailand, I never really thought actually about where my energy came from. I was highly conscious about energy saving, carbon emissions. I created environmental clubs when I was in high school. I joined campaigns in the United States to preserve our forests. I knocked on doors to collect funds, but I never actually thought about the source of energy. Where does it come from? How is it made? How far does it travel? I just switched on a light and then I knew I had electricity. I was fortunate enough to have that access to electricity, but I never really thought about the distance of electricity to my home. I might just want to show you just a little graphic, just to visualize it as soon as I become technological adept as well. Okay. No, maybe maybe I can just explain it as well. Okay, I just explained it. It's okay. So, see, Jan, it's across all generations. We are all still learning. So the concept that I wanted to show is basically, so electricity, before it becomes an electrocarbon, essentially, most of our electricity today comes from fossil fuels. And unless you're coming from a country where fossil fuels are being extracted, it's going to travel a very long time. The supply chain from electricity to us is very long. There's the extraction of fossil fuels, there's the cleaning up of the fossil fuels, and then you also need to transform it, transport it, and then transform it into electricity. And then it has to go into the transmission grid, and then it has to go into your local grid, your community, and then finally it gets to your home. But for example, in Germany, the whole power network is the length of 3.5 times the distance from Earth to Moon. This is Germany. So imagine what it could be for other countries. It's a crazy number. When now, you know, we are starting to think of other options to generate energy on site and not so far away, and we use it every day. So this is just one side, right? This is electricity. We can also think about this in the sense of where does the oil from our car come from? It's a bit of the same story. You know, it has to go through a lot of different processes. It has to travel on a boat to then arrive to us, or sometimes it's a pipeline that goes through many countries. But it's basically not created where we're like using it. So more and more now we are shifting towards towards alternative energy sources, right? We're realizing this is not sustainable. There's a great movement, and it's so good to see the younger generations now. Maybe when they hear me, they're like, Vaitea, come on, you should have been knowing this much earlier, but at least finally you know it now. So what I wanted to bring today, some questions, right, that we ask ourselves is, well, like, renewables are amazing. They're great, but they're not available 24 hours a day. What can we do to have availability of, how can we use solar energy when it's nighttime? How can we use wind when there's no wind blowing? And also, part one of the question, or the questions that we ask ourselves on renewable energy availability. But the second part of the question is, solar electricity is great. Can I power a plane by storing solar electricity? Can I use green electricity and replace my fossil fuels in industry? Can I make cement with just green electricity? So our power sector, our energy, sorry, our sectors of consumption of energy are quite broad, right? We have power, which is electricity. We have mobility, we have heat, and we have industry. And a lot of them can use green electricity. They can use renewable energy. However, there's a lot of them that also need another type of energy. They need another source of energy, which is why they've been using fossil fuels all this time. And so fossil fuels is a hydrocarbon. Green electricity, it's an electron. Electrons, unfortunately, are not very compatible with ships, with planes, and with the whole industrial sector, because those need a lot of energy. And batteries, if we were to use that as an energy source, they'd be too heavy, basically. So I think we're pretty much now ready. We've laid the ground of what our options are and what could be an alternative. And so one of the alternatives is the hydrocarbons, and a green, clean hydrocarbon is hydrogen. Essentially, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It's our #1 element on the table. And it can be made from two simple things: electricity and water. So water, as we know, is H2O. And the role of electricity here is that a clean way of producing hydrogen is to pretty much zap the water with electricity, and the O and the H2 will split. So this is called water electrolysis. It's a simple experiment that a lot of us actually do in school, where we have a battery, we have the two wires on the plus and the minus, then we put it in water, and then we see the bubbles fizz out. And the side that has the most bubbles is the H2, because we have two H and only one O. So when we think of it at a much larger scale, we can start creating much more hydrogen, not only with the battery and the small experiment, but to actually power homes, to fuel cars, not only cars, right? Ships, planes, and also to use it in our industrial sectors and also heat homes. So remember the Vaitea house? This was my introduction to hydrogen. And my co-founders actually are German, and they wanted to live self-sufficiently, completely off-grid, and yeah, use solar energy, hydrogen energy storage, so that they would have long-term energy independence. Some batteries as well. Both technologies are complementary, but hydrogen is great for seasonal storage, long-term energy storage. And this is how I was introduced. And 2 years after I met them and had created a communication collaboration platform of the Vaitea house, it became a lighthouse project. And then we had the chance to co-found Enapter. And so Enapter stands for Energy Adapter, because what we want to do is to waste no renewable energy, and rather to transform it into hydrogen and then use it in any sector. So we're adapting to our energy needs. So one of the use cases for hydrogen is our homes, for example. There are homes in Germany, there are homes in Sweden, in the US running on hydrogen. But as mentioned earlier, why do we believe that hydrogen can really play a big role in decarbonizing our future energy world? Is that it can also be used in the mobility space. So how does this work is that you can have on-site production of hydrogen where the refueling station is. This can be for company cars, for example, but some of our use cases are quite cool. I feel like we're getting a bit of a glimpse of the future. We're seeing hydrogen drones fly, for example. And so what we do at Enapter is that we create this device that creates hydrogen. So we will have the green energy come in, and then our device is a stack essentially where there's the electricity that goes in, the water that goes in, and hydrogen comes out. And so our partners are using this to refuel their hydrogen drones, for example, but they're also using it to refuel snowmobiles. And most recently, we're very proud to announce that we are the partners for the first hydrogen plane that is being developed in the UK and had its first flight earlier this week. So planes are also in the making. This is a small passenger plane. We're not yet at the Boeings. We're just the huge, large commercial flights, but the first steps of hydrogen aviation are being made at the moment. And what's important here to know is that the only emission when a hydrogen plane flies is water vapor. That's it. Another use case as well that we have, for example, in the Netherlands is residential district heating. And here we have our electrolyzers stacked in a container with the fuel cell, as well as the storage tanks. And these are providing heat for buildings in, so it's in Rosenburg, and it really was a proof that hydrogen works. We did it with a certification company called DNVGL, and it really showcased, okay, now we can actually start shifting towards hydrogen. Why is hydrogen great for heating? Is that we already have the existing infrastructure. Natural gas, hydrogen, they're not so different. One's clean, but we can use the existing infrastructure to already heat our homes and switch from one to another. And finally, the industrial sector, which is, I don't know, growing up, I never really thought about where fertilizer is being made, how is cement being made, what about glass, all these different industries that in the end we are end users of down the line, but how were they made in the first place? And surprisingly, hydrogen is being used in a lot of these different processes. And instead of using hydrogen made from fossil fuels, now we can shift towards hydrogen made from green energy sources. So we are seeing today governments, countries are putting in place the right framework for green hydrogen to be more widely adopted. So this is good that at least there is a momentum from the public sector as well. Coming from the private sector, our focus is really to scale the production of our systems so that the prices come down and that it can be cost competitive with fossil fuels. So I think the three takeaways or that I wanted to share, or at least the main messages that I had from my story was that I wanted to share that we shouldn't be afraid, that we should be brave. I didn't know Thailand and I traveled there for the first time, and I also didn't know my co-founders, and I thought their project was very interesting, so I knocked on their door and introduced myself. So be unafraid, be authentic, and great things will happen. And the other takeaways were to start thinking of what is the source of what we use, of our food, of our textiles, and of our energy, and also to start thinking about what could our future energy look like, and hydrogen could play a role in it. So thank you very much. I hope you learned something new today, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Hi. Just now you mentioned that you can get hydrogen through electrolysis, water electrolysis. But doesn't the water electrolysis take energy also?
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. So for example, our system consumes 2.2 kilowatts. And so of course, there has to be an initial electricity source. However, when there is excess renewable energy, for example, in Australia, right, there's a lot of sun, and we couldn't even use all the sun that is shining in Australia. So instead of letting the sun just go into the solar panel and then there's no more space in the batteries, or there's just no need for the electricity in the moment, this is where our system can come in place and be like, ooh, extra energy, I take it. And then I transform it into hydrogen, and then you can use it whenever you want, because hydrogen will never lose energy density. So it's too much electricity, because instead of wasting it, you use it and transform it into hydrogen.
So it's using the extra energy from all the other clean energy sources to make hydrogen, which is a clean energy source.
Yes, so that's one use case. When there is too much renewable energy, then it'll be transformed into hydrogen as an energy vector. Because you cannot, if you plug hydrogen into something, nothing will really happen. It's holding energy, but then you need to transform hydrogen into electricity via a fuel cell. And that's the element that will convert it. But there's not only there's not only a creation of hydrogen via excess energy projects, let's say. There are also some dedicated facilities for on-site production of hydrogen, for example, to use in the mobility space or to use in the industrial space, because they need a lot of energy. So once we get out of the consumer side or the residential or the community side, we go into high consuming energy sectors like mobility or industry. They will dedicate space when they choose to shift to hydrogen, just for creating hydrogen and not only using excess.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. I actually have two questions. First one is, so basically when it goes to electrolysis, there's a first excess of oxygen, and then when let's say it goes through, like the hydrogen is used for like a car, plane, or ship, whatever. What is the reaction that turns it back to water?
Okay. So for the first question, sorry, I was taking a sip of water. Maybe I totally missed your question. But did you ask me what happens to the oxygen?
So no, sorry. What is the reaction that turns it back to water? And also, second question is, if you're holding hydrogen, isn't it expensive to hold a gas, or will it be liquefied? I'm not sure.
Okay, good questions, great questions. So the process of turning hydrogen into electricity is called a fuel cell, actually. So fuel cells have been out for much longer than electrolyzers, in the sense that they've been commercialized for much longer, and they're being developed in different sizes. So depending on how much energy you need, you will have a different size of fuel cell. And this is what is on board mobility. So it's like planes they don't have a motor, they have a fuel cell, basically. It's the same for cars, it'd be the same for drones, for example. And so this is the device. In terms of storing, you raise a very good point. Storage is expensive, it can be complicated, and if we're going to need a lot of hydrogen, where are we going to store it? If we think about it in the mobility sector, for heavy loads or long distances, hydrogen holds a great case, because the alternative, if we're thinking about electrifying mobility, would be batteries. And the thing is that batteries take a lot of space. And when we compare the energy density of hydrogen with, okay, well, now we're going to compare it with fossil fuels. With fossil fuels, it has 3 times more energy density than fossil fuels. So it's a pretty quick win of like, okay, well, obviously, if this is clean and has 3 times more energy density, it's great. And when we compare it to electricity, the difference here is actually on the weight, because gas, and especially hydrogen, is the lightest element. So you can put a lot and compress it to 700 bars, for example, and get much more fuel then you would have enough space for batteries, and that would be heavy, which is why we can't use batteries for planes or for ships.
Okay, thank you.
Vaitea, you mentioned a lighthouse project. It's worth explaining what a lighthouse project is. It's not a term, but it's very, very useful.
Absolutely. So a lighthouse project is like a lighthouse. So we've got the, it's the first, it's the first project basically that shows to the world, sheds light on, hello, this is the reference of how, for our case, solar and hydrogen can be used in a residential setting. So it shows to the world an example of something that works, and also, in our case, invites others to come visit the house, to come understand how it works, to see it in real. So we actually had quite a lot of schools in Thailand visit us to really understand it, to see it. And so here we play the role of being a reference point and shining light on the possibilities of hydrogen.
Very cool. And the other thing is that I guess I can mention that you're Forbes 30 under 30, right? So how did that work? Did you get a nomination, and did your life change significantly? And how can you now fly using hydrogen because you're Forbes 30 under 30? What are the superpowers you gained by being nominated?
Superpowers. Ooh. So no. How did it happen? We were fortunate to be nominated by a university. It came by surprise, actually. We got the email from the Forbes community that said we had been nominated, and then you go through a sort of interview process. You go through several interview processes, and then 4 months later, you get the news. So it was actually fun to do it with my co-founder, because we were 3 co-founders, which is the owner and, of the Pisua house, and his son, who had designed the whole microgrid, and myself. So we're both the under 30 co-founders. And during the interview process, every time we realize how opposite personalities we have and how complementary it is to founding a company together. And then getting the news 4 months later, he was the one actually who announced it to me. I was in a train in Germany from Hamburg to Berlin. The connection was horrible. I couldn't see the news, but I just got on a call with him and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It felt really good to get the validation and to get the support as well from the Forbes community. Since then, since the news, with the current situation in traveling, it's been a little tricky, but they've done a really great job to shifting events and meetups online. And I would say that the greatest benefit so far has been joining a community of really hardworking individuals who are online, the Slack channel 24/7, and you can just ask any questions and someone will come back to you based on their experience. So it's a variety of experiences and a variety of interests. And there is a community, there's a vibrant community in the United States. So time zones are, sometimes you have to juggle with them, but it is superpowers that I've gained would be access to international knowledge and a diverse diversity of fields.
And is that, do you have an app, or is there a kind of a logged in website where you can exchange those things and have private conversations? What is the structure they have? Because I'm asking out of curiosity so I can copy some of those things here as well. Sure.
Yeah, nothing so fancy. I think actually they have an app. I think they launched it recently, and it's an app that complements their Slack community. So I would say if you are launching a community, I'm in the different communities like the Cairo Society in Europe, which is also an American, has an American chapter. This is, yeah, it's basically like under 26 co-founders is for Kairos, and then I feel like Forbes is like the is the next level, and both of them are using Slack channels. So I think that would be the best thing, actually, to keep it narrow, not to have the app. I feel like no one really uses it, to be honest. Like, it works, but people are used to the Slack environment. People can connect more directly with the Slack environment. So I would recommend using Slack, and then just having different channels based on topics, ask and give. We can go into it if you have any questions.
That's good. Any more questions? I think you can go on for a few more minutes and then have a shorter break again this time. What do you guys say? You can pick anyone you want from the list and just put the light on them, the lighthouse. Pick one and say, hey, Jan, you're also in Germany. How come you're not driving a 7 Series hydrogen BMW yourself?
I'm curious, maybe if there's anyone in Asia joining, perhaps Ineke Catherine Nauli, if you had ever heard of hydrogen in your country, if it has popped up in the news or not. You're muted. But I really appreciated that I could see you. That's why I was like, okay, I can ask you.
Sorry, I was talking to my husband. But yeah, I haven't really followed the news on closely on hydrogen. But both my kids were asking questions earlier, and they're like really super interested in this topic. So yeah, I don't have anything to comment for now.
Mm-hmm. Feel free.
I have a question.
Questions. Yeah.
Sure. Why are hydrogen cars so expensive?
I know. It's like, as consumers, it's like, come on, I wanted to, but I can't. It's expensive because it's still, I don't even want to say that, give the excuse of like, it's still early in the days of manufacturing hydrogen cars, but it's true. It's true in the sense that, how does business work, right? There's supply and then there's demand. And right now there's a little bit of supply. There's a growing supply of it, but there needs to be also growing demand. So it's a bit of a difficult situation out there, I think, for fuel cell auto manufacturers. In Korea, in Japan, I think they're really pushing the adoption rate. And how they're doing this is because governments are coming in, they're stepping in and saying, okay, if we would like to support you in buying a hydrogen vehicle, so we will give you a discount. They give you an incentive, basically. So they give you some money so that you pay less for the car. But I would say that it's the hydrogen industry is still, has been around for a while, and it's been seeing like hype, and then it just goes under incognito. No one hears about it anymore. And now finally, this last like 5 years, it's kind of coming back up, and then we're realizing, okay, it's going to stay now. So there will be, the prices are here now, and they will go down as the industry picks up, but it's different factors from a technological standpoint, from a demand standpoint as well, and different actors need to come together to create the market and to make it more affordable for us as an end user to say, okay, now I'm switching to hydrogen. But hydrogen buses are coming out quite a lot. I see them a lot in the UK, for example. In Germany, they're running as well. So maybe you won't maybe you'll ride on a hydrogen bus before you ride on a hydrogen car.
Okay, thank you.
How long do you think it'll be until like hydrogen, the usage of hydrogen energy would be like a norm, or like majority uses it?
Good question. Good question. Every day I wake up and I was like, let's do it tomorrow. So you can see different speeds taking place in the world. Japan, as mentioned earlier, has as a vision and a mission to be a hydrogen society. So they are quite advanced in implementing hydrogen in their all their activities from an industrial standpoint, mobility standpoint, and also the home standpoint. So some houses have a fuel cell in their homes, and the hydrogen is being delivered through the infrastructure to their home directly. So you can already see hydrogen as more or less a norm in Japan, but it's not all the islands are running on hydrogen in Japan. So it's still quite early, but you can already see it much more adopted than you would, for example, in France. So countries and states are moving at different speed. If you look at the United States, for example, California is the most advanced state in the US, where they're rolling much more on hydrogen, and they're trying to encourage more adoption. So we have our climate goals, right? By 2050, our temperatures cannot increase more than 1.5 degrees. So we have clear goals of what we need to do and the time frame that we have. So the main barrier today of green energy being adopted is how much it costs to create green hydrogen. So the only way we will have more adoption of hydrogen is for our devices basically to be less expensive. And this is why we want to produce more and more and more, because then it's the concept of economies of scale. The more you produce, the less expensive it gets. So once we, as an industry, scale the devices that produce hydrogen, then there will be more hydrogen. It'll become more of a norm. To give you maybe like a date, our aim is not 2050. 2050 is way too late. Our aim is 2025. So we are working all the time in a healthy way to realize this. And so this is when I would hope by 2025 that it is a norm. At least in the developed countries, to lead by example, and to also maybe give a bit more room for the developing countries to still use the fossil fuels that they haven't used as much as the developing countries have, and then shift towards the clean energy transition. So hopefully 2025.
I have one last question. In the last NeoWay, we actually spoke to a person, and he said that solar planes has just been invented. And people have been researching on solar power probably much longer than they have on hydrogen powered things. But which one do you think will be like the most used in the end, solar or hydrogen?
Excellent question. Which one will it be? I think they will both have a use. It will depend on the distance and how many people go on this plane. I believe that solar planes will be a great demonstration and a great use for short distances and a couple passengers. I can definitely see them already flying, and also, I mean, I almost want to say I wish private planes could all go solar, and then, but anyways, but so I would say short distances and small amount of passengers. I would see that going for the solar, and for the hydrogen, the industry is just starting, right? So they're making history at the moment by having their first flights. But as they grow, I would say that they would go into maybe longer distances and more passengers. But let's see. We both get to watch who wins this race and how it goes. I'm not sure, but I'm also just as curious as you to see how it goes. So this is my assumption.
All right, guys, so we only have 5 minutes for the break. Shall we make a jigsaw puzzle with a hydrogen car, for instance? Vaitea and all the other speakers still here, you're most welcome to join in the game. I don't know if you saw the last one we had, but Sanyan just posted in the chat jigsaw.
Oh, nice.
So we assemble a jigsaw together.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
And the audio of Zoom stays, so you can use it to communicate.